to talk about the energy thing, because I have been in congregations that were stuck, and I'm now in a congregation that's not stuck, and because of that experience, I know it's not as simple as the minister is responsible for all of it either way.
I guess my question, Liz, you asking the question brings to mind other questions, which is the congregation or are congregations at periods in which it's necessary to be fallow, or are they dead? You know, and a fallow period has
fallow or dead.
Because if they're fallow, then more activity won't get them out, but more discernment may be exactly the kind of thing, and actually lessening any focus on what are we going to do, what are we going to do, what are we going to do, and it's not about how, but it returns to those foundational questions of why and for whom. And so in fact, it could be a time in which the energy takes on a different form and it appears from the outside perhaps, that there's less going on, but it's just sort of subterranean for a time.
Well, your question makes me reflect, having been a while in this congregation, and I came to a congregation which you wouldn't have walked away saying, wow, that congregation has energy. And so I'm thinking, now what has happened and why? And I think one of the things that's happened is that the congregation I came to, they knew each other too well. And they came to church mostly to be with each other. And they did not have any sense of serving anybody else. They were there to see their friends. And then they were there to gather up with their friends to fight with the minister, and then they were there to see their friends again. And that's not very compelling to anybody new, and it does not look very energetic even when things are going on. But I think now people come to get other people involved in the things they're doing, which is a very different dynamic. And so there's tables, and there's performances, and there's outreach to new people in ways that there wasn't before.
I think this has a lot to do with chemistry. My church, you know, this is the first church I ever served. Hopefully it'll be the only church I ever serve. We're sitting there waiting for me to come, and here I am walking in the door looking for them and not even knowing that I was looking for them. This is, Marilyn and I were talking about not being mystics, but there's some level of the divine that when the right person meets the right circumstance, magic, as I call it, happens. Now what's happening now is they're like, yeah, he's the right guy for this neighborhood and everything, but oh my gosh, we're actually, the expectation has been raised. We've been asleep for so long, we've been like Rip Van Winkle, and now, you know, he's actually showing us a new reality that we want to go to, but we're afraid because we've never seen it.
Right.
We've never seen it. In 1954, we've been this little church, and now you're saying we're going to become this bigger than life church. We can't see it. Help us, you know, help us to see it. And okay, now we're afraid. We're going to the edge with you, and we're totally afraid to jump off.
There's sometimes things that can start killing energy, and all of us have been there. All of us have heard ministers get to a place where there are people, there are destructive impulses in all institutions and certainly in churches. And, you know, we have to deal with that. And I am pretty fierce about dealing with that in my church. I don't let those destructive impulses push out the positive impulses. And sometimes it has gotten to the point where it's been difficult. It has been difficult, but we deal with it and we keep that positive energy in charge at the church.
If the growing churches are also the healthy churches, or at least one large set of the healthy churches, I wonder if that's one of the things that makes us, we really are willing to be fierce shepherds.
That's made a big difference in my congregation. My learning to be able to do that, and then teaching some other leaders to do that. They're a small town, so they're worried about hurting people's feelings, or they got worried about that. And as I've learned, and as they've learned, to say, no, we're not going to do that. No, you can't behave that way. They say no, and then there's sort of this, do we just say that? And then after a few weeks of everyone thinking, oh no, we've just ruined everything, and then things go better.
I do think that a growing congregation is effective at managing conflict. And one think the secrets of that is understanding the difference between the loyal opposition and the disloyal opposition. I think one of the biggest errors that any of us can make as ministers or as our lay leaders is to be too reactive to people when they appear to be dwelling on the negative. We just we're in the midst of a $10 million building project that was the result of 4 years of deliberation. And all the way along the line, there were many times in which we would have loved to have booted about a dozen people out of the congregation. And yet, throughout that process, figuring out and finding ways, and not just me, but my lay leadership, to minister to the people who were adamantly opposed to what we were doing, really ended up in a situation where we lost nobody. And the negative energy dissipated because, as it turned out, those people all had some very valid reasons for the positions they were taking. And yeah, there was a lot of negativity for a while. But ultimately, they chose the community over their particular ideas about the way that this project needed to end. And we spent a lot of time, trying to think about, what kind of energy are they bringing to this, and what are we modeling for the congregation if we can continue to embrace these people, throughout a rather contentious process. And I agree absolutely that there are certain people, who don't have an investment in the community and a reason for the behavior that they're exhibiting. But on the other hand, even when that appears, and we're talking about kind of disloyal opposition, I don't want to be the congregation's policeman.
Right.
So my job in that particular instance is to try to, as you say, give the confidence to the lay leadership to be able to take care of those situations, so that I don't become the lightning rod and I don't end up becoming the alpha male, in my congregation, because that's not the way I want to appear.
I'd rather be the bad cop so that others in the congregation can be the good cop, and to come to that member with care.
Let me respond to that real quickly, because it's probably maybe a difference in philosophy. Number one, I think that the prophetic pulpit is one thing. I think community maintenance is the responsibility of the community at large. And that doesn't mean you're sending someone out, to basically fulfill your responsibilities. But I think that I want the congregation to get in the habit of taking responsibility for community maintenance. And I will try to help them to do that, and they need to do it in a way that, there's not just one person who's the deliverer of bad news, but they are speaking for the congregation, and they are empowered by the congregation to do that. That's one thing. The second thing is, I've only got so much capital as a minister, and I'm not going to blow my capital on individual, kinds of squabbles with members of the congregation, because I think that that's ultimately going to diminish my ability to lead. So that's one of the reasons that I do it the way I do.
And I would return to that, and I don't mean to jump on this and create conflict.
That's fine.
I'm going to model it. I'm going to model the type of community behavior that I want seen in this community.
There was a